In the kingdom of Valethorn, strength was everything. A wolf's power decided its place in the world, from the mighty alphas who ruled the packs, to the lowest omegas who were barely allowed to speak. Lyra Ashworth belonged to that lowest rank. She had been born without a wolf, or so everyone believed, and for 20 years she had carried that shame like a stone tied around her neck. Her family had once been respected, but when a debt to the crown could not be paid, Lyra was sent to serve in the palace of the Alpha King, Draven Cain. He was the strongest wolf anyone had ever seen, a ruler feared across every territory, and he made no secret of his disdain for the girl who could not shift. "Bring more wood for the fire, Broken One," he had said to her once, in front of his entire court. The warriors laughed. Lyra lowered her eyes and did as she was told, the way she always did. She had learned long ago that arguing only made things worse. Silence was safer. Silence was survival. Every night, after her chores were finished, Lyra retreated to the small room she shared with 2 other servants near the kitchens. It was cold, and the straw mattress barely kept out the chill of the stone floor, but it was hers, and no one bothered her there. She would lie awake staring at the narrow window, watching the moon rise, and something strange would happen inside her chest. A warmth. A pulling sensation, like a rope tightening around her heart, as if something vast and ancient wanted to wake up. She never told anyone about the dreams. In them, she ran through silver forests under a sky full of stars, her paws light on the earth, though she had no memory of ever having paws. She heard howls that were not quite wolf, and not quite anything else, ancient and mournful, calling her by a name she did not recognize. She always woke from these dreams with her heart pounding and her skin buzzing, as though lightning had passed through her. Only one person in the palace seemed to notice that something was different about Lyra. Sarah, the old court healer, had kind eyes and a way of looking at people as though she could see straight through their skin. She often found reasons to call Lyra to her chambers, claiming she needed help preparing herbs, though Lyra suspected these visits were about something else entirely. "You carry more than you know, child," Sarah told her one evening, grinding dried lavender into a bowl. "I have tended this court for 40 years. I have seen many wolves rise and many wolves fall, but I have never met anyone quite like you." "I am nothing," Lyra said quietly. "The king said so himself." Sarah's expression tightened. "Kings are not always wise, even when they believe themselves to be. Draven Cain has strength, yes, but strength without understanding is just another kind of blindness." Lyra did not know what to say to that. She had grown so used to believing the things people said about her that kindness felt almost like a trick, something that would be pulled away the moment she leaned on it. Still, Sarah's words stayed with her long after she returned to her small, cold room that night. Meanwhile, trouble was gathering at the edges of the kingdom. Word came that a neighboring pack, led by a ruthless alpha named Kestrel Vane, had grown tired of watching Valethorn's borders and had begun testing its defenses. Small raids at first, cattle stolen, scouts found injured near the woods. Draven dismissed the reports as nuisances, too confident in his own power to believe anyone could truly threaten his throne. His pride had grown as large as his strength, and pride, as every elder in the kingdom knew, made even the strongest wolves careless. Lyra heard the whispers among the servants, the fear that flickered beneath their calm faces whenever Kestrel's name was mentioned. She noticed too how Draven's warriors trained harder now, how the king himself seemed to prowl the halls at night, restless, as though some part of him understood the danger, even as his pride refused to admit it. One evening, as Lyra carried a tray of food through the corridor outside the throne room, Draven stopped her. He looked at her the way he always did, as if she were an unpleasant smell he could not quite place. "You still flinch when the warriors pass," he said. "Even the youngest pups in this kingdom do not flinch. What good is a servant who cannot even stand her ground?" "I do the work assigned to me, my lord," Lyra answered, keeping her eyes low. "That is enough." "It is not enough," he said, his voice sharp. "Weakness disgusts me. I do not know why my father allowed your family into this palace at all." The words struck harder than she expected, though she had heard worse from him before. She said nothing, only bowed her head and continued down the hall, her hands trembling slightly around the tray. She told herself it did not matter what he thought of her. She told herself this every night. But some nights, the lie grew harder to believe. It was 3 nights later that the attack came. Kestrel Vane's forces struck under cover of darkness, slipping past the outer watch and setting fire to the eastern wall before the alarm could even be raised. Chaos erupted through the palace. Warriors scrambled from their beds, shifting mid-run, snarls and shouts echoing through the stone halls. Servants fled toward the lower cellars, but in the confusion, Lyra became separated from the others, pushed by the crowd into a side corridor that led toward the gardens instead of safety. Smoke curled through the air. She coughed, trying to find her way back, but the corridor twisted unfamiliarly in the dark, and before she could orient herself, 3 of Kestrel's warriors rounded the corner, eyes gleaming amber in the firelight. Just a servant, one of them sneered, stalking closer. No wolf in her. Easy prey. Lyra backed against the cold stone wall, her heart slamming against her ribs. She had no claws, no fangs, no shift to protect her. She was, as everyone had always told her, nothing. The warriors advanced, and for one terrible moment, she believed this was where her story would end, in a forgotten corridor, unmourned and unremembered. But something inside her refused to accept that ending. The warmth she had felt every night beneath the moon, the pulling sensation, the ancient howls in her dreams, all of it surged upward at once, as though a dam that had held for 20 years finally broke. Pain seared through her body, but it was not the pain of injury, it was the pain of becoming. Her spine arched. Silver light spilled from her skin like moonlight given form. The warriors stumbled back, shielding their eyes, shouting in a language of fear Lyra had never heard directed at her before. When the light faded, Lyra was no longer the trembling servant girl who flinched in hallways. She stood taller, her eyes glowing with a soft silver fire, and around her shoulders shimmered the faint outline of a great wolf, ancient and powerful, its presence radiating from her like a second skin. The warriors who had cornered her only moments ago now turned and fled, crying out about a queen risen from legend, a bloodline the world had believed extinct for 1,000 years. Word spread through the burning palace like wildfire. Draven, fighting at the front gates against Kestrel's forces, heard the commotion before he understood its meaning. When he finally caught sight of Lyra standing amid the smoke, silver light still clinging to her skin, ancient power radiating outward in slow, steady waves, he nearly lost his footing entirely. This was not the broken servant he had mocked in his court. This was something out of the old stories his grandmother used to tell him as a child, tales of the first wolves, the ones who had ruled before kings and thrones existed, when power was measured not by cruelty but by the strength to protect. Lyra moved through the chaos with a calm that startled everyone who saw her. She did not attack. She did not need to. Her very presence seemed to steady the panicked warriors of Veilthorn, and when she raised her voice, clear and unshaking, commanding the enemy forces to stand down, something in her tone made even Kestrel's most hardened fighters hesitate. Kestrel himself finally appeared, cutting through the smoke with murder in his eyes, expecting an easy victory over a wounded kingdom. Instead, he found Lyra standing between him and the gates, glowing faintly silver, unafraid. "You are supposed to be nothing," he snarled. "I was told that too," Lyra said, her voice steady, despite the fear still trembling somewhere beneath her ribs. "For a long time I believed it, but I do not believe it anymore." The power that had awakened in her did not come from anger or vengeance. It came from something older and steadier, a protective strength that had waited patiently inside her for the moment she would need it most. She did not have to fight Kestrel with claws or fangs. Her presence alone, ancient and undeniable, was enough to make his warriors falter, enough to make him realize that whatever advantage he believed he held had vanished the moment the sun began to rise behind her, painting the sky in gold and rose. Facing a servant who had become a legend, and watching his own forces lose their nerve around him, Kestrel made the only choice left to him. He called his warriors back and retreated into the forest, vowing this was not the end, though everyone who witnessed the dawn knew his threats now carried far less weight than before. As the smoke began to clear, and the palace guards regrouped, Draven finally approached her. He looked at the woman he had mocked for years, the one he had called broken in front of his entire court, and for the first time in his life, he did not know what to say. "You could have told me," he said finally, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. "I did not know myself," Lyra answered honestly. "And even if I had known, would you have believed me? Or would you have mocked that too?" Draven had no answer for her, because he knew, deep down, that he would have. His pride had blinded him to so much, and standing before her now, he understood exactly how much that pride had cost him. He had spent years measuring worth by strength alone, never once considering that true strength might look different than he expected, quieter, more patient, capable of enduring cruelty without losing itself. In the days that followed, the truth of Lyra's bloodline spread throughout the kingdom. Sarah, finally free to speak what she had long suspected, explained that Lyra descended from the very first wolves, a lineage older than any Alpha throne, one that had gone into hiding centuries ago to protect itself from those who feared its power. Lyra was not broken. She had simply been waiting, unknowingly, for the moment her strength was needed most. The court that had once laughed at her now bowed when she passed. Warriors who had called her weak now looked at her with something close to awe. But Lyra did not let the sudden respect change who she was at her core. She remembered too well what it felt like to be dismissed, to be made small by people who never bothered to look closely enough to see her truly. She treated the servants with the same kindness she always had, and she made certain that no one in the palace would ever again be mocked for their perceived weakness. Draven, humbled in a way he had never been before, began to change as well. He sought her counsel where before he would have dismissed her presence entirely. He listened, truly listened, when she spoke. Slowly, cautiously, something shifted between them, not born from his throne or her newfound power, but from a mutual respect neither of them had expected to find. When the kingdom finally crowned Lyra as the Wolf Queen, acknowledging a bloodline that predated Veilthorn's very foundations, she did not stand beneath Draven's throne, nor did she stand above it. She stood beside it, an equal in every sense, her strength no longer hidden, her voice no longer silenced. As dawn broke over the kingdom on the day of her coronation, painting the sky in soft gold, Lyra thought back to all the nights she had lain awake in that cold, narrow room, believing herself unworthy of anything more. She understood now that weakness had never truly been her story. It had only been the disguise worn by a strength the world was not yet ready to see. And as the light spread across Veilthorn, touching every corner of the kingdom that had once dismissed her, Lyra Ashworth stood tall, no longer the broken girl mocked in the shadows of the throne room, but the Wolf Queen the legends had always promised would rise, exactly when her people needed her most.